Due to some violent content, parental discretion is advised.
You are traveling through another movie, a movie not only of horrible acting and nonsensical plots, but of bad directing. A journey into a shitty production whose plot coherence is that of imagination. Your next stop is The Shadow of Death.
You probably got... Hey, kid. Easy on the machinery.
It doesn't work right.
Kid, I don't build the games. I just keep the quarters. Why don't you stick another quarter in? Maybe it'll work better.
Here we are, the final segment of the Twilight Zone movie. It's the remake to It's a Good Life, directed by Gremlins director Joe Dante. Without hesitation, this is not only the best segment in the Twilight Zone movie, it's one of the best of anything to do with the Twilight Zone. Seriously. Joe Dante could have gone the route that Spielberg did and make an almost direct remake, but he said fuck that and he made something totally original. This is the way a remake should be. It takes the basic ideas and plot points and goes in an entirely different direction. It didn't decide to copy, it went in its own direction and did something unique. If only more modern productions would do this. We start the segment by being introduced to our main character, Helen. Yeah, you would think it'd be Anthony, but it's not. She's the main cog that the story revolves around, and everything has to be explained to her. She replaces the 2-minute long intro from Rod Serling. And to be blunt, she's one of the things about this episode that kinda, well, she sucks. She has like zero personality, and her point of being there is really only to drive the story. It kinda takes away from the simple simplicity of the 2-minute intro from the original, which did more to set up the world than this character ever would. She exists only to move through the story from point A to B. She stops at a diner where we get cameos from the late, great Dick Miller.
Hey, kid. Easy on the machinery.
It doesn't work right.
Kid, I don't build the games. I just keep the quarters. Why don't you stick another quarter in? Maybe it'll work better.
Oh, and Bill Mummy's there too.
Walter, the kid is screwing up the TV.
Hey, it's his quarter. The TV's free, you know.
That's right, the original Anthony is in this, making him the only actor to appear in all 3 versions of It's a Good Life. One thing you might have noticed is we're in the wide open world. That's because this is the wide open world. The story takes place in one house that's been moved from existence rather than a town. Anthony can move between the 2 freely, it's just that the people that live there can't. Speaking of young Anthony, he's doing what any good kid in the 1980s would be doing, playing video games. That is until he's accosted by some guy, and rather than using his powers, he's saved by Helen.
Okay. Hey, Charlie. Hey, come on, man. Take it easy. That's it.
That's enough.
What's going on here?
Let's take a brief moment and talk about Anthony. How does he fare compared to Bill Mumy? The simple answer is he's not that great. But to be fair, that comparison isn't really that fair. He has no way of topping that performance, but really, who could? Honestly, it's not even fair. These two are 2 different versions of the same character. This Anthony is acting more for attention than Mumy's Anthony, who is just for all intents and purposes a dictator. Well, Helen leaves after she diffused the situation, but then the funniest thing that I think I've seen in about 5 minutes happens. I can't believe that this actually happened. He's the ultimate badass and he gets hit by a car. Oh, let's see it again. Oh, that is just too much. One more time. What I love about the 80s is she runs this kid over and she's like, oh, I'll just take you home, and everyone's cool with it. Nowadays, there'd be lawsuits and people tearing you apart on fucking social media. So they go to his home, which we see is out in the desert, surrounded by dilapidated cars. Inside, we meet his family. Mom.
No. You see, I'm going to have to be fixing supper.
Dad.
Poor thing. Not one solitary.
Everyone's got one of these, a sister with no mouth.
That's Sarah, my other sister. She was in an accident.
Oh, and his uncle, played by the late, great Kevin McCarthy.
Oh, yes, sir. Nothing, as you can see, in the hat, right?
He also happened to appear in a Twilight Zone episode, Long Live Walter Jameson.
Nothing
lasts forever. Thank God.
And then there's his other sister, who just happens to be Nancy Cartwright. Yes, the voice of Bart Simpson.
Oh, great.
Your attention, please. Your attention, please. I have an announcement to make. I'm bored.
Right away when they enter the house, you can tell that something's going on because everyone's giving him an inordinate amount of attention.
Hello.
This is Helen.
Helen Foley. Oh, Helen. Delighted.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Helen.
She gave me a ride home.
Did she?
You don't mean it.
Very generous of you.
The other noticeable thing with this house is that it has a very cartoon look, and there are TVs everywhere with cartoons on it.
I'm just...
Well, now, you know, we are so happy that you can eat with us.
This is not surprising considering the playful nature of Anthony. The family sits down to eat its dinner and it's nothing but cookies, candies, sweets, and shit. But best of all is a hamburger with peanut butter.
Good evenings for everybody.
Yummy, yummy, yummy.
You did take advantage of that. You won't forget it.
Peanut butter. It's good that way.
Where did you get the box?
Helen, of course, thinks it's gross, proving once again that I hate her.
And butter makes the burger.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I could eat another plate for him.
Honestly, hamburgers with peanut butter is one of my favorite things. I eat it all the fucking time. It just proves that people in the early 80s did not have good palates. What a bunch of Philistines. Of course, the dinner's ruined by dumbass Helen, and then Bart Simpson pisses off Anthony.
You're young, you need your nutrition. You can't eat like this all the time. Oh, of course, it's a birthday supper.
Another birthday? With presents and wishes?
From there, McCarthy attempts to show a magic trick, and then the scene of the fucking segment happens. Holy mosquitoes, that is awesome. It makes you wonder how many kids saw this when this came out and shit their pants during this. Although, they were kids in the 80s, we were used to this sort of shit, so we were pretty badass. Seeing this nightmare, Helen tries to flee, but Anthony reveals that he will make anything for her if she stays. That's when they find a note asking for help. Everyone blames Bart Simpson, and she reveals that Anthony brought all of them to the house and keeps them prisoner. They are not his real family either. He had already gotten rid of his parents. Bart Simpson is sent to this segment's version of the cornfield, Cartoonland, and she's killed.
I'm wishing you in a cartoon land. I told you cartoons are good. Anything can happen in them. That's all I thought.
Having just witnessed a brutal murder, Anthony pleads with Helen that he just wants people to not be afraid of him. I'm not sure how that works considering that he just murdered somebody and then he creates a fucking cartoon monster. Helen's able to convince Anthony to get rid of the stupid monster. In doing so, he also gets rid of the house and sends his family away, except for Helen. Helen agrees to help Anthony and basically become his teacher. Her logic in doing this is that they can hopefully learn something from each other and that she can help him control his power and use it for something good. They go back to reality and drive away as the sun is setting. Anthony makes flowers bloom in the desert. Hopefully, he's changed for the better. And that was the last segment from the god-awful Twilight Zone movie. Honestly, if you're gonna watch the movie, just skip the first hour and watch It's a Good Life and Terror at 20,000 Feet. You won't be disappointed. In our final episode, we will look at the last part of It's a Good Life, the sequel, made in 2003. So, till next time.
Thank God.
That's all I thought.
Yo, subscribe today.